How long could you survive inside a nuclear reactor? The short answer: not long. But let's imagine for a second that, somehow, you found yourself inside one. Not in the control room, not even in the reactor building, but right there, next to the core, surrounded by metal, concrete, and pure, unfiltered radiation. How long would you last? Let's find out. First, let's set the stage. A nuclear reactor is not just a big box with glowing green goo, like cartoons show. In reality, it's a complex system designed to control one of the most powerful forces known to humans, nuclear fission. Inside the reactor core, uranium or plutonium fuel rods are undergoing a chain reaction, splitting atoms apart and releasing enormous amounts of energy. That energy heats water, which turns into steam, which drives turbines, creating electricity. Simple enough. But the problem isn't the heat. It's the radiation. Radiation inside a nuclear reactor is not something you can see, smell, or feel. At least, not immediately. But it's there, everywhere, all the time. To understand what would happen to you, let's first look at how radiation affects the human body. Radiation comes in different forms: alpha particles, beta particles, gamma rays, and neutrons. Alpha particles are relatively harmless unless you ingest them. Beta particles can burn your skin, but won't go too deep. But gamma rays and neutrons? They're the real killers. They pass through your body, smashing into your DNA, your cells, your organs, causing chaos at the microscopic level. And inside a reactor, gamma rays and neutrons are everywhere. So let's say you somehow get inside the reactor containment building. You're already in trouble. Even if the reactor is shut down for maintenance, the residual radiation levels are still dangerously high. You might get exposed to enough radiation in a few minutes to cause radiation sickness, nausea, vomiting, headaches, and within hours, your body starts to break down. But let's make it even worse. Let's assume the reactor is operational. Now you step inside the reactor core itself. This is where it gets terrifying. The core is surrounded by thick walls of reinforced concrete and lead to stop the radiation from escaping. But inside, there's nowhere to hide. The levels of ionizing radiation near the fuel rods can reach up to millions of sieverts per hour. For comparison, a dose of just 5 sieverts delivered all at once is enough to kill a human within weeks. A dose of 10 sieverts will kill you within hours. Inside the core, you'd be getting thousands of sieverts every second. In other words, the moment you set foot near the core, the countdown begins. Within milliseconds, the radiation would start to damage your nervous system. Your cells would literally begin to break apart. Your DNA would be shredded beyond repair. If you stayed there for even 1 second, you'd receive a lethal dose, enough to guarantee death within minutes or hours. But realistically, you wouldn't even make it out of the room. Your skin would begin to burn, not from heat, but from the intense ionizing radiation. Your internal organs would start to fail almost instantly. Your nervous system would shut down. You might not even have time to register what's happening. Within seconds, you'd collapse, your body already beyond saving. But let's go further. Let's talk about Cherenkov radiation, the eerie blue glow you sometimes see in reactor pools. That glow isn't dangerous by itself, but it's a visual reminder of just how much high-energy radiation is flying around. Imagine standing there, watching that blue glow, knowing it's the last thing you'll ever see. And it gets worse. If, by some miracle, you manage to be inside the reactor building without immediate fatal exposure, say, hiding behind shielding, you'd still be facing long-term effects. Even relatively low doses of radiation increase your risk of cancer, organ failure, and genetic mutations. But inside the actual reactor core, you don't have to worry about long-term effects because you won't live that long. So, how long could you survive inside a nuclear reactor? At best, a few seconds, if you're lucky, and only near the edges of the core, shielded by some equipment. But near the active fuel rods? Less than a second. You wouldn't even feel pain. Your body would shut down before your brain could process what's happening. Nuclear reactors are engineering marvels, but they're not designed for humans to be inside them. That's why every inch of the reactor is heavily shielded, controlled by strict protocols, and constantly monitored. It's why reactor operators go through years of training, and why, even during maintenance, no one goes near the active core without extensive protection. In the end, a nuclear reactor is a place where atoms are split, energy is created, and humans simply don't belong. So, unless you're wearing a full-body lead suit, carrying your own air supply, and somehow immune to radiation, the answer is simple. You wouldn't survive inside a nuclear reactor. Not for long. Not even close.